right. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to Dynamics of Podcast, the only podcast dedicated to Professor James Moriarty, Napoleon of Crime and arch nemesis of Sherlock Holmes. I'm Madeline Quinones. I am joined remotely by my lovely co-host,
Dixie Parkinson.
And then, of course, well, I just literally introduced everybody else. But for the sake of the recording, please introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Heather Holloway. I am one of the directors of 221BCon, and Star Trek is the closest thing I have to religion.
Hi, I'm Ashley Polasek. I've been at 221BCon since the beginning, but I've been a Trekkie even longer than that.
And I'm Lee Shackleford. I watched a man trap sitting on my mother's knee. That was on September 5th, 1966, and haven't looked back since, and had the honor and pleasure of writing for Next Generation, including episodes in the Holodeck. So there you go.
Yes, this is the From Baker Street to the Holodeck panel, which is a legacy panel. And I was like, let's bring that back. And I'm saying that as like kind of a baby Trekkie myself. Out of everybody here, Dixie included, I still have like the least amount of Trek experience.
Well,
That's okay. Welcome. Yeah.
Not for lack of wanting to, just time. Always the enemy, right?
Yeah.
There's always more room on the Enterprise.
We're like a Baptist. We don't care how long you've been here. We just want you to be really fervent about it.
Right.
Oh, having grown up Baptist, yeah. All right, so what I kind of was hoping to do was to just kind of run chronologically through Star Trek with its relationship with Sherlock Holmes. And I guess one question that I have is for you guys specifically is what, like, there's a whole lot of, I think, crossover in terms of fans between Sherlock Holmes and Star Trek. So why do you think that is? They're very friendly fandoms.
Well, there is a Sherlock Holmes in every iteration of Star Trek, right?
Every iteration?
Well, I mean, Spock and
Data, but
Odo, I think.
Odo?
Is he? I suppose maybe, but I would see him more almost as maybe a Lestrade kind of character, because he's more of an official investigator.
Technically, he's the constable, but I mean, in terms of character traits, it's like the not quite human character, right? The person who is not quite human, who is trying to operate within the bounds of arguably human society, and sometimes getting it right and sometimes getting it wrong, but mostly not giving a shit about that.
Yeah.
Except Data cares.
To employ logic when surrounded by emotion.
That's right. Yes. Yeah.
So who would it be in Lower Decks?
What do you think?
I don't know. I'm trying to think.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'll think on it.
We'll think on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
but does Odo have a Watson though? Because I would argue that that's
Quark.
I mean,
scenario, he is also doing the crimes.
Yeah.
that I'm all here for that. I'm all here for that.
Yeah.
okay.
I don't know. Why
Okay.
else? Why else does it draw you? I mean, here's a question: Who here came to Trek first versus coming to Sherlock Holmes first?
Trek first.
I
Oh,
came-
me Star Trek first, definitely.
Well, I'm the only one who was Sherlock first.
Yeah. I think you were.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I remember running around my basement when I was 6, yelling things like, "The sofa will explode in 3 Earth minutes."
So I did specifically come to Star Trek after watching Elementary Dear Data. So that was what pulled me in. So
Whereas for me, it's in many ways kind of the opposite. Star Trek introduced me to a lot of elements of Sherlock Holmes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's what I was wondering. Are we moving toward a thesis here that we were drawn to Sherlock Holmes because he reminded us of Mr. Spock?
I think we're more like just a set of people who enjoy logic in general. Like I like the orderliness of Star Trek society.
Mhm.
Like I like and so I don't know. I just feel like there are like the kind of person who likes Sherlock Holmes, a person who logics through everything, gets all the data, and comes to a good answer before the end of the episode. It's going to be the same kind of person who likes to be on the Enterprise, watch them have a problem, logic through it, and come to an answer before the end of the episode.
I agree, and I think that there's also sort of adjunct to that is a desire for an optimistic worldview. Whether you feel like we live in a really imperfect world or not, Star Trek is fundamentally optimistic, and I would argue Sherlock Holmes is fundamentally optimistic.
I agree with that, yeah.
It's about restoring order to a chaotic world.
Right.
And believing that there can be an order in a chaotic world.
Yeah.
Which is hopeful.
There's always an answer. No matter how awful that answer might be, there always is one. And I think that's a very optimistic thing, ultimately.
Yes, I would agree with that.
All right.
Yes, I would agree with my own statement. Good job, me.
Yes.
But I think that's not only an astute but profound observation. I really, yeah.
No.
That'll be my takeaway.
Hey.
Yeah.
We can all go back to the bar now, guys. Wait a minute, how long is the podcast?
You're
I mean, Dixie and I will try to carry out on our own. It'll mostly be Dixie then. Hey, no. By the way, just saying, Dixie did a really phenomenal two-parter. And I mean, I say she did, it was both of us, but she was mostly the one presenting on The Master and Doctor Who, of which she is an expert. So yeah, I know she's blushing. She's my sister from another mister, so that's a dynamic we've got going on there.
That's the dynamic of this podcast.
That's the dynamic of this dynamic of a podcast. Yes, indeed. All right. Well, okay. So Spock then is very Sherlock Holmes like. Do we think that's kind of on purpose? Is it just kind of the trope of having a super smart character and was maybe Holmes is
genetic.
Yeah.
Well, yes. Yes.
Apparently so.
Yes. I do hear that Nicholas Meyer won't commit to saying that.
That's okay.
But
The author's dead, so it's whatever.
right.
We can inform him of what is right, what is wrong. The next time we see him, listen.
I'm fine with telling Nicholas Meyer how things are.
Whereas me, like at the last distinguished speaker lecture, I was like with Beth Gallego, and I was like, Nicholas Meyer is right behind me. Wow.
Usually I'm like, oh, Nicholas Meyer.
Yeah, well, you've been around this road, ladies, and I have not. So Spock and Kirk often get compared to Holmes and Watson, and I have not watched a whole lot of. I hardly watched any of TOS. I will be honest.
I can send you a list of all the best episodes.
Oh, I love that. I definitely love that.
Your list of best episodes.
I am literally in the middle of a TOS rewatch. Like
I'm always in the middle of a TOS.
So I recently, I've always loved Star Trek. It was my first hyperfixation. It's the most important fandom to me. But you wax and wane in these things. And so I recently really hyperfixated again. So I've decided that this year I'm watching every single episode of any Star Trek ever in release date order. So, but I also have a really demanding job, so I can't just binge it. So it's going to take a while. But yeah, so I'm in the middle of it.
That's a lot of episodes.
Yeah.
Right. It's a lot.
Anybody else?
I haven't even seen every episode.
So ITV it starts with an episode of TOS at I think 8 p.m. and then 9 p.m. is Next Gen, 10 p.m. is DS9,
Oh, yeah.
11 p.m. is Voyager, and at midnight they do Enterprise. And then every night, every weeknight, it's that block. And if you sit down and watch TOS, which is the one I always tune in for first, you look at your watch and you're like, I don't know how I got here with Scott Bakula, but this is where I am.
Y'all remember Spike TV? Does
Oh,
anyone
yeah.
remember Spike TV? So remember when Spike TV got Star Trek: The Next Generation?
And wore it out.
They wore it out, but that was when my friend Michael and I were in college at the time. We came up with a rule. You had exactly 3 minutes after the end of the Star Trek episode that was on to get your ass up and turn off the TV before you were already engrossed in that episode. It was a full hour before you could get dinner. And so that's when we learned that.
That's totally fair.
Yeah.
I'll do the old Trek watching with my husband, and we have a thing with especially the original series where which one of us can identify the episode soonest. And usually one of us will get it just by the and it's just the planet. And we're like, Doomsday Machine.
But Spike TV did give us the Lursa and B'Etor commercial. Does everybody remember the Spike TV commercial with Lursa and B'Etor? So it's like they're in a conference room and it's like supposed to be the Spike TV people making decisions. And they have 2 life-size cardboard cutouts of Lursa and B'Etor from Next Gen. And they're like, the meeting's over and there's these 2 dudes just sitting there like with papers, like finishing something up. And one of them turns to the other and he goes, hey.
Would you?
Would you? And the guy just looks at him and the first guy goes, I would. Which is hilarious to me, but I met those actresses and I asked them about it and they were very offended.
Oh, no.
They were extremely offended. Yeah. I felt bad because I thought it was hilarious.
Oh,
Yeah.
That's sad when that
I
kind of
know.
thing happens.
Yeah.
If I even look at my text messages literally with my husband, I only have to go back to yesterday at 9:53 p.m. to see the text message, Darmok and Jalad Tanabra. Nothing related, nothing before, nothing after. Just, you just know what that means.
On my phone, I have like a favorites for like reaction memes. I have, regular, and then I have 2 folders. Favorites for reaction memes, and then literally just one other folder that is titled Star Trek memes. Because I prefer to do reaction memes with Star Trek memes, so I needed an entire folder just for that.
I knew I loved her.
For anything that's not, it's easier to just filter it out.
Yes, exactly.
So far, we've said nothing about professional.
I know.
I know.
Sorry.
I was not wanting to just jump right to that because I felt like that would be unfair. And
We're just nerding. You invited us on here.
Right? 3 cats and we're going after her.
I knew what I was doing. No, because this is what makes this fun.
Yes.
So yeah, so what I have seen more of the TOS movies than I've seen of the actual.
Yeah, I mean that's right.
So I've and actually come to think of it, I've only seen the even ones.
Well, I mean,
We get that.
that's
okay.
fine. There are some solid, hilarious things in those other ones that you should really hit.
I mean, I do plan on like watching all of Trek. I really do. It's it's a lot.
It's all.
Yeah.
Whole lot. Yeah. And they just announced yesterday they're canceling Lower Decks, which it's so upsetting to me because that show's hilarious.
That's what I hear.
It's the Star Trek sitcom I have always wanted.
But yeah, I just the funny thing for me about watching I think Wrath of Khan and the Voyage Home, especially, that is what it's called, right? I always just want
Voyage Home.
The whales.
yeah.
Well,
But like watching those, I just have a whole lot of feels about Kirk and Spock that I know are just kind of like my Holmes and Watson feels that are just transposed really onto the 2 of them, but they do make me think at that point, they do make me think so much of like older Holmes and Watson.
But the interesting thing is Holmes and Watson are a duo, whereas Kirk and Spock are part of a trio, because you've got McCoy there as well.
I've always thought of them as the sort of Freudian tripartite, right?
Yeah.
One is ego, superego, and id, and Kirk is ego.
Which is literally why, I mean, literally TV tropes, tvtropes.com puts it as the Kirk, the Spock, the McCoy, and with those juxtapositions. And I can, because I don't really know a whole lot about psychology, I can never keep straight like which is which. But yeah, I think that's really funny that's just so accepted. It's part of TV tropes.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, great website if you've never been there. It's a whole lot of fun. You can really do some serious rabbit holes there.
Yeah.
But in ancient Greek playwriting, there was this sort of idea that was forming of character prototypes and triangles of characters that worked, and they came to call those the Cynic, the Stoic, and the Epicurean. And that works for the three of them too.
Sure does, yeah.
So
Nice. See,
I'm
Star Trek.
Yeah, I'm just learning all kinds of things here. Yeah.
Heather, what's number 1 on your list of recommendations?
Yes.
Oh, but for like TOS?
Yeah, TOS.
Yeah.
You can give us a top 3 if you don't want to like
Okay,
make one of the
so
3.
I genuinely love the Corbomite maneuver. I just really love it, everything about it, and
First,
the Tranya,
Tranya.
which I say all the time.
I do too.
And like all the time. I was literally in a hotel and they had like this coffee station on every floor and it said, "But first coffee." I walked up and there was this dude getting coffee and I was like, "But first, the Tranya." I was like, I'm just kind of you're like, no, that's not one of mine. I'll take care. I'm just gonna keep going.
Right on going.
No.
Drive-by nerding.
The Corbomite maneuver is one of my like, oh, I'm tired, I'm gonna fall asleep, I'll just start this episode. And I also love the Lower Decks episode where they throw back to that, but the guy's real. This is a puppet and it's not. Yeah, I don't know. I could tell you that I think my least favorite is the alternative factor. I don't like that episode.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's just a bad episode, but
a beleaguered episode.
yeah, I know. No, that like beard was the worst beard in the history of television.
And it's not even like a funny kind of bad, like Spock's brain.
No, and Star Trek has some bad beards. So like the fact that it's number 1 of all time.
Star Trek has some bad beards, could be taken a lot of ways.
This is
And
true.
they're not, none of them are in
And all of them are true.
All of them are true.
Exactly.
But like even the episodes where you're like, this is not a good episode, you still like pull things out of like, we at home quote, it's the E plebista, and you just go off. We, the people, look at these words here, bigger than all the rest. You must take all of them or they mean nothing. Doesn't matter if it's bad, it's still good.
I'll still watch the alternative factor.
Right, like I'm not gonna not watch
it. Yeah, I mean, Next Gen is what got me into Star Trek. When I was in 4th grade, I just randomly watched an episode of Next Generation on channel 46, and I was hooked from then on out. Like it was, my entire family was once outside playing kickball, and I was like, "What time is it?" My uncle was like, "At 7:10." I was like, "Crap! It's Star Trek is on." It's like, and so like
Next Gen was also the first show that I remember like knowing the time when it was on and making the time to go sit down and watch it.
For me that was Voyager.
I remember having to wait between Best of Both Worlds.
My sister was on an intramural softball team in middle school, and I was in the same age group, but I'm a sports person. But so we went to her coach's house for like a barbecue, and then everybody was in his like pasture, and they were playing softball, so I went to play, and it turns out I'm actually pretty good pitcher, like actually really good. And so the coach came over.
Surprise, fuckers.
Yeah, I know. And so I was as surprised as anyone else, let me tell you. And so the coach came over to me and my mom, and he was like, Heather, you know, you're in our age group. You were having a really good time. Why don't you join our softball team? And I was like, oh, I'm very sorry, but your practices are during Star Trek, and I can't do that. And I turned to my mom, like laughing, and he's like, no, and my mom's like, no, she's dead serious. She's not really during Star Trek. And so, yeah, I was a sad, nerdy child.
Yeah.
But I was okay with it.
Yeah, no, my brother and I used to play Next Generation, but we'd have to divvy up all the characters between just the two of us. But he's 4 years older, so he took all the fun parts, and I had to be everyone else.
Oh, that sucks, man.
It was
That's just brothers for you, period. I'm the oldest. It still happened to me.
really.
No, I'm the oldest and the oldest of 37 cousins. So
No.
I ruled with an iron fist.
That's
I thought She-Ra and He-Man.
I believe that, but Heather, I have zero intimidation factor,
Oh, okay.
so that's the problem.
Fair.
Yeah.
I don't know, somebody did the other day, they put on some Facebook page, they were like, who's more attractive? And it was Will Wheaton as Wesley Crusher and Jonathan Brandis as, what was that kid's name? Wallencheck, something, Lucas Wallencheck. And I was like, you can't put my two first loves. Everybody was going, and they were like, well, somebody says like, well, what does it say about your taste in men? And I was like, well, I'm a lesbian. I think geniuses are just like a gateway drug to like, you know, like
Smart women.
to like, yeah, like lesbians with science degrees. So, like that's it. So like,
This is what it's like.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Anyhow, this podcast is about what?
Yeah, I apologize to all of your listeners.
That's right.
I mean, we did specify that it was about Star Trek at the beginning.
Yes,
Like,
that's true.
we're still getting a little bit of Sherlock Holmes in there. But of course, Next Generation is my favorite. I'll be honest. It is the one that I've seen the most episodes out of, and also Data is far and away my favorite Trek character. Data is.
Sure, I protest. I am not a married man. I say that's all.
But yeah, I mean, Data is very Sherlock Holmes already, and then when Picard makes that offhand reference, and Data's like, "What is this, Sherlock Holmes?" And then like the next time.
Well, we could probably speak to that more than any of us, right? You were there.
I was there,
You were
yeah,
there.
yeah. In 1990, I was in New York playing Sherlock Holmes in my play, Holmes and Watson, off Broadway. And when I came back home, I had messages on my answering machine. Fantastic timing. What a great time in my life. It was my agent asking me if I would like to go pitch for Star Trek: The Next Generation. Yeah. And that was just about the time, well, a lot of other things happened, but by the time I got out there in a network pitch like this, you've got to come in with 20 ideas because they're going to shoot them down. It's a skeet shoot. They're going to say, no, what else you got? No, what else you got? So you have to like dream up a whole season of a TV show like that.
Wow.
Before you go in the door. But Elementary Dear Data aired sometime during the time when they first called me and I went out. And I said, oh my God, Data is going to be Sherlock Holmes in the holodeck. Well, okay.
I got you.
I got you. And I went out there and I pitched what would ultimately become Ship in a Bottle. But first they said, well, actually, we can't do that anymore because the estate won't allow it. And I said, I've just come from working with American Executor for the rights, and I'm pretty sure that's not true. And it turned out they had read that in Sherlock magazine. I believed it.
Star Trek is getting their information from
Sherlock.
Sherlock, nothing's wrong.
That's excellent. I love that.
Isn't that weird? But anyway, but all I had to do is put John Lullenberg, who was the executive of the state, in touch with the head of Paramount Legal. And so then I was able to come back into that writer's room, you know, having been the one who made it possible for us to do more Sherlock Holmes related stories in the holodeck. And yeah, I pitched a story that would ultimately become Ship in a Bottle. It's part of the way the Writers Guild works, though, is that every time somebody comes in and makes a change to the script, it gets further away from the original material, and they literally count words. So the person who's put the most words in it gets screen credit. So my name isn't even on it.
We know.
But I was going to say, I used to say John knows.
What was the original story then?
What I really want to do is get Moriarty out of the holodeck. I just thought, we know that's possible, even though we had established elementary data that it isn't, that we got it, as long as we can keep him in that room. I said, this is too good to pass up. We've got to get it out. And when it's now been so, this is 34 years ago. I now don't remember a lot of the details about the story, because when you go into the writer's room, immediately there's 6 other people in there, or however many, who are saying, yeah, but what if? And so if you're smart, and I did have somebody teach me this early on, you don't say, I don't know. What you say is, yeah, and then you better start steering what you were originally going to say in the direction that this person who's actually on staff is going to take it in. So somebody in the room, and I'll never remember who, had the idea that we could just convince Moriarty that he has succeeded. And that would be the end. That moment went by like that. I don't even know who said it. But the head writer for that season was Rene Echevarria, so he ends up with screen credit on it. As well he should, because I kind of think, looking back, that he's the one who said that. But this is the moment that I remember Jerry Taylor, who was one of the executive producers there, kind of a stern woman, who I got to know socially later to find out that she's a nice lady. But she wasn't in that room. Anyway, she was always the taskmaster in there. But I said, but I pitched the final problem in Empty House, that the way to get rid of Moriarty was to kill him. But Data would have to sacrifice himself in the process. But Geordie's read the canon, so he has not only loaded the holodeck up with final problem, but Empty House. So it wouldn't kill Data, even if we have all the safety restraints off, which seems to happen with amazing.
Why is there an option to turn off the safety? What?
Because it's no fun otherwise.
Well, that's not loving the lower deck. They have to go clear out the light. You know exactly all that's in there, but.
Yeah.
The holodeck is a horrible idea from like a psychological standpoint.
Yeah.
Not something humans need to have access to.
They mention that, they hint at that a lot in the books of what actually goes on a lot.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a lot more blatant than they are on the show.
Yeah, those Barclay episodes.
Yeah, the
would have been
Barclay
a lot
episodes,
different, wouldn't
they're
they?
not, yeah. We all know what was going on with
Yeah.
Barclay,
That
really.
episode is called Hollow Pursuits, which I always thought was not only a great pun, but just a great comment. The idea that he's so wrapped up in his fantasies that he's not being, useful in the real world. And I thought, is this Star Trek kind of gumming the hand that feeds it?
Is this about me?
Yeah.
Because
But yeah, how exciting to have Geordie say to him, we need you out here, Reg. It's a compliment. Your imagination is actually what we need out here in the real world. So, it's good. It's a good thing. But anyway, yeah, that's I'm still the one who got Moriarty into the holodeck. I still. But yeah.
And now we all know, and everybody listens.
And
I had a convention, a Star Trek convention, once invited me to come as a speaker to do panels about writing for the show. And I did do a lot of other things on the show. It just, I don't have any, they went.
Can't prove it.
I can't prove it. They went to IMDb and I don't have any credit for it. Believe me, I've tried. The number of people, a lot of the people that I was in the room with, they're gone. Some of them are dead.
Yeah.
And John.
It's got nothing to do with you.
No. Total coincidence. But one of the stories that I pitched explained why the classic series Klingons and movie Klingons look different.
Ooh.
And they said, and I'm not making this up, the show's official explanation is they've always looked that way, you just don't remember it right.
Oh.
But then they did end up doing an episode about it in Enterprise.
Yeah, they did. They
The
did.
showrunner for that episode was in the room with me when I pitched.
Oh.
Boo, that guy.
Not calling any names, but
We want to rag on here for it. All day, every day.
I have a friend who worked on Enterprise and he would, yeah, he could give you ammunition. So, yeah, anyway. So there you go.
I do have a question about like the story for Ship in a Bottle. Like, was the Countess, was that part of it? It kind of sounds like that wasn't part of your story. Was that a different writer's edition?
It was, yeah. And another one of the reasons why I say Red actually should have screen credit anyway, because that's different. Reg wasn't a part of my story at all. Oh yeah, and I didn't tell the rest of that story, that when I pitched the whole idea of doing it according to canon, Jerry Taylor said, that's cute. Which, yeah, at the time I said, oh, good. But then I got out of the room and said,
Wait a minute.
that was not a compliment. Yeah. So, yeah. So that's right. So that I noticed that the next conversations about that was no longer part of it. So, oh, I guess it is cute.
It's clever.
I mean,
I would have enjoyed it.
I would have enjoyed
well,
it.
yeah, certainly.
But then again, your target audience is literally in this room.
Exactly.
Yeah,
That was
yeah.
fine for us, but yeah.
It might not have played so well in Star Trek proper. Yeah, the fan fiction.
Yeah, that's.
It's a very
It works,
dramatic,
yeah.
dramatic idea.
Yeah.
You know, where you think you've lost data. I think it.
But of course, the thing. You know what? Wait a second. Is there anybody here who like either A, hasn't watched the third season of Star Trek Picard, or B, doesn't know what happens in it? Because I want to talk about a spoiler.
I don't, but I don't.
Can I talk?
Neither do I.
Okay. Well, so they bring Data back to life.
What?
And so then
Yeah,
that,
Rose
I think I kind of actually love that the two characters in Star Trek who are the most like Sherlock Holmes, Spock and Data, both actually end up dying and coming back to life, as Sherlock Holmes himself does.
Yeah.
And I think that also with Data, it makes the most sense actually. But yeah, because I mean, because we are doing this panel specifically in this point in time past the end of that show, I mean, that is the most recent like example of Star Trek bringing Sherlock Holmes in. Of course, they brought Daniel Davis back to play a version of Moriarty.
Yeah,
and I hear that when the trailer dropped at like, what was it, New York Comic-Con, that when he showed up on screen, that the room went wild.
As it should have.
Right.
Watching that trailer, I went.
Yeah.
God damn it.
Seriously.
I hate my life.
30 years, come on.
I was just so happy, and I've seen like some people be like, that was just fan service, and I'm like, yes it was. We were the fans being served.
Right.
All of Picard is fan service. It's supposed to be.
The purpose of season 3 of Picard served.
And I love it love it that with bringing Data back in the way that they did it, they just, one of the things that they made clear was that Sherlock Holmes and even the episodes with Moriarty are still very important to Data. Because Moriarty ends up being part of this, like, not only this this defense system, but also this system of clues that Riker finally figures out, like, wait a second, all of these things are related to Data. And then they find him. And then when Data is like just sort of unconscious and kind of remembering things, you hear him and Geordi on the holodeck, and you see the pipe and the hat, and I can't tell you how happy that made me.
But you think of the journey that Data was on as a character,
Mhm.
which was always about trying to overcome his essential nature to be more human, to be able to look at Sherlock Holmes as a human, I mean, fictional, but meh, right? As a human who was already like him. And the idea that there was a way to be himself and to be a person at the same time. Sherlock Holmes represented, God, you guys, I love a Venn diagram. A Venn diagram, right, of logical, reasoning machine, which Data literally is, and Sherlock Holmes figuratively is, and human, and that you could be in this space, and you could be both. Yeah.
Which one of these characters are you suggesting is fictional? That's where I lost you.
You know what? At this point, I'm pretty sure it's just me. I'm fictional, and I'm viewing reality through a lens.
Oh, sorry.
I remember having a conversation with a girl in college who is no longer in my life, but we were both huge Trekkies. That's kind of how we bonded. And we had this, like, it was really late at night and we were pretty drunk, but we were talking about Star Trek. And I remember she said this thing and she goes, I know that Star Trek isn't real. Like, it's just a television show. But if Captain Picard showed up right now and asked me for help, I wouldn't be that surprised. And, like, that's kind of how I feel about, like, so much a part of what makes me me that, like,
I feel that it's the future we haven't lived yet.
It's the future we want to get to.
That's right. Again, fundamentally optimistic, right?
Yes.
If we can survive our eugenics wars.
Well, the Bell riots last year.
Yeah,
That's right. It's true. Well, somebody had said something the other day. They were like, there's 3 things about Star Trek. What was it? It was it's gonna show you an optimistic but difficult to achieve future, and the most batshit insane gay subtext you've ever seen in your life. That was like every single episode. Yes.
So reality.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
And that's pretty much my life. So
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're just living it, you guys.
So I'm gonna take a moment to plug one of our previous episodes. We did it last year. We actually got to interview Daniel Davis, and Max is a big fan of that episode. Oh, thank you. Dixie, do you want to talk about that at all?
It was just so much fun. He was so great to talk to, and for me, it was such an honor to talk to him because he is really like my introduction to Moriarty. Star Trek was, like I say, introduced me to a lot of Sherlock Holmes concepts before I read the canon. And so I wouldn't be doing this podcast if it wasn't for him and if it wasn't for those episodes. So it was just so much fun to do.
Mm-hmm.
I would have just wanted to ask him about the nanny.
I mean, we did ask him about
Yes. We also love the nanny.
Yeah,
I love
yeah.
Annie too.
Yeah.
That is a sound text.
And I think that, I think that he understands that, if he's in an interview with somebody, the nanny is going to come up.
I mean, that's definitely the first line of his obituary. So.
Right.
Is it now? Because I think he would be more known for the.
Maybe some
No,
obituaries by
no.
Niles and Moriarty, but and Anyway,
Maybe in this room, but
In this room,
but in real life.
in real life.
with normal people.
But yeah, when we first started this podcast, it was always a dream of ours, like maybe we can get him on the show because he's always said that he really liked playing this character. And then that trailer dropped and we were like, okay, we've got to get him on the show and we've got to try. And then when I actually got a response to my email, I just about had a heart attack. And then when we were and then we had to sit on it for like 2 months before we could actually tell people that it was going to happen. And it was really hard. But it was just such a dream come true. And he really is, like, between the two of us, he is one of our favorite Moriarty. And the thing is, I don't think that we are ever going to interview a Moriarty actor who means more to us. Yeah. Like Eric Porter is gone.
Yeah.
And even if we got any of like the big names, we don't feel about their versions of the characters the way that we feel about this version. Yeah. So even though that would be super special, it wouldn't be special in the same way.
But that's Star Trek for people too, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's how we all feel about Sherlock Holmes, which is it's more than a text. It's more than a universe of texts. It's deep in our bones. And Star Trek is like that. I mean, it's how we took over the first half an hour of this podcast. Yay, Star Trek is that it is emotionally important. I mean, I'm a different person without Sherlock Holmes, and I'm a different person without Star Trek. I have other, fan loves and other things I'm hyper fixated on. But I'm still essentially me if you delete them from me. If you delete Sherlock Holmes or you delete Star Trek from me, I'm a different human being. So
I mean, like for me, sci-fi is a huge part of my life, but Star Trek is what got me into sci-fi. Like I have no idea what kind of person I would be if I hadn't been introduced to it way back as a little child. Like it's always been such an important part of my life in a way that I don't think any other show or franchise has ever been.
It's formative. And I mean, it's the way you engage. It's the way you engage with different texts as you learn to be and heard, right? The things that you figure out when you're young, the texts that are formative for you, that help you understand how to really care about something in a way that enriches you. And Star Trek was certainly that for me. Like I learned to draw because I love Star Trek. I need to draw these people, right? Because I love them so much, I need to figure out a way to make them. And so that's how I got into visual art, was having a sketchbook of Star Trek.
I think I did too. Now that you mention it, I hadn't thought about it as an origin point, but you're right. I wanted more of the show. So I started making more.
Right. And the same thing with, how do you learn? You write more stories. You learn to tell more tales, and it's a way of learning to be a fan of X. But Star Trek is, for a lot of us, I think, the text that helped us do that.
I agree. It was for me.
Yeah. Also, the text that taught me how to use VHS tapes to tape. Before there were such things as like DVD collecting, I would go to the pharmacy and get the blank tape, and it came with all those little sticky numbers. You guys remember that? And I had like this giant thing of VHS tapes where on the top label I had carefully written the name of the episode, and then on the front label it was like the little numbers where I could get like the little number 1 and number 15 and then a comma, and then all out of order. And I remember you would like scour the TV guide to see if the episodes that you were missing were coming on so that you could complete the set, and I fucking never got Devil in the Dark. I'm still pissed. I have the DVDs now and I still don't care. I want my numbers.
An unfinished collection will haunt you for your life.
Yeah. You need to finish this.
I'll die mad.
when I think about it, I genuinely miss recording on VHS tape. I mean, it is a different thing recording it to, your DVR, which has a finite storage capacity and all
It's
these
too
things.
easy. It's too easy to be able to look up the schedule in advance and just tell it to record. If you don't have to wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning to press the record button and stay up until you hit the stop button.
When I was in 6th grade, we moved to a new town, and it was like, I already lived in the middle of nowhere. My dad decided to find like the liminal space between nowhere and move there. And we didn't have cable because there was cursing and naked people on cable, and my parents were not here for that. Yeah, I know.
And yet you became anyway.
I don't, right, and here I am. But when we got there and they put them in it, our antenna would not get the channel for Star Trek.
Oh.
And I was so upset. So one day I come home from school and my dad has bought me my own personal antenna. And he has put it up against the house next to the window of my room. And so it's only hooked to my TV. And I would go outside like 5 minutes before Star Trek came on every day. And I would have to manually turn the antenna while watching the TV until I got. Okay.
Yeah.
And then I would go in and watch Star Trek. And my dad loved me a lot, but I think he just was tired of hearing me bitch about it.
But this is how it works to be a fan, right? What are you willing to sacrifice? How far are you willing to go for the thing?
Yeah.
I am willing to individually turn an antenna.
Star Trek taught you being
There you go.
I also asked my mom to go to Klingon language summer camp in 5th grade. And because I had a subscription to like a Christian kids magazine, and they were talking about how somebody was translating the Bible into Klingon. And also in Pennsylvania, every summer there was a 1-week Klingon language summer camp. You could go learn Klingon. And my mom was washing dishes, and I go and I was like, "Mama, can I go to summer camp this year?" And my mom's like, "Well, what summer camp do you want to go to?" I know she's like my bookish inside all the time child finally wants to get in a canoe. And I'm like, "Mama, there is a Klingon language summer camp in Pennsylvania, and it's for a week every summer. I would like to go." And my mom, I remember the clear, she picked up the dish towel, she dried her hands, she turns around and she snapped it and she goes, "No, you cannot go to Klingon language summer camp in Pennsylvania." I mean, she just like walked off, and I was like, "Oh, I guess that was a no."
I guess I'll just have to get the dictionary and teach myself.
I mean, to be fair, my parents were never going to let me go to another state without them, but I was like, "But summer camp, that sounds like something."
That sounds like something I should be allowed to do.
I go to vacation Bible school in the summer. This is just
You should have been like, they're translating the Bible into Klingon. I gotta know.
on scripture.
I know Klingon, so I can contribute to this project. I have been assigned the gospel according to Matthew.
You haven't read the New Testament until you've read it in the original.
My parents were long suffering.
Listen, I can safely say that everyone in here had long suffering parents.
Oh, okay.
My dad gave me which I still have, the Star Trek compendium that had like the every episode of the original series and the descriptions and how, And I mean, mine is like worn to shit because every time there was an episode on compendium and reread it.
So did you, I'm sorry.
No, go.
I'm sorry. Do y'all know Maggie Schpack?
Yeah.
Who gave it the Klingon alphabet?
No, what?
Okay, so I was at the bar during BSI with Jerry
Which is
Pickley, with
The best time to find out things.
Yeah,
It
and
is.
so Crystal was like, Heather, come over here. Jerry needs to tell you something. And she's like, "Sit down. You're going to be really excited." And I was like, "What?" And he goes, Maggie is the one who created the Klingon language." And I said, "Well, no, Mark Ockring created the Klingon language." Like, because I've met him. And he's like, "No, the language, she created the alphabet." And so what had happened was, for like Star Trek 6, they wanted her to make the sashes for the Klingon.
Oh yeah.
And they wanted Klingon letters on the sashes.
Mhm.
And so they just told her to. And so she was like, "Okay, well, what's the Klingon alphabet?" And they were like, "What?" And she's like, I mean, I can't put a Klingon word on here if you don't give me that Klingon alphabet. And they're like, we'll get back to you. So they contacted Mark Cochran and he was like, I never made an alphabet, just the language. And so they came back and she was like, okay, well, just give me the information about the language and I'll figure it out. And Maggie sat down and created the entire Klingon alphabet that they, like, Discovery used it during the Klingon War. That was Maggie's letters.
Oh,
Skidmore.
I don't know because I don't. My mom wouldn't send me to summer camp. Yeah, but Maggie was also the one who made all the Star Trek communicators and like
the belt buckles and the pips and the because like Monica Schmidt has a beautiful movie officer's costume that
Some of us made our own.
the costume itself, but then the jewelry is Maggie. It's the real
I
deal.
made my own jewelry too. Anybody else here go to high school in a Star Trek uniform? Just me? No, not just me.
I went to some of the movies in homemade Star Trek uniforms.
That too. Yeah, I did that too.
Oh, you got a question?
Yeah.
The name.
Oh, the Maggie Schpack, and it's SCHPAK, I think.
Yeah.
That's right.
She
That's right.
but I know
You can find her very easily.
She also told me herself years ago that the reason she didn't have a sign on her, building where she made all the TV and movie jewelry was specifically because of Trekkies tracking her down after they found out she made it.
I believe it.
That's
Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was a really well known, like almost all the
one of hers,
jewelry.
right?
Yes,
Did we add-
no, she didn't do that.
The Ashpin? I
She
thought
did
the
not, no, it was somebody else, because I specifically asked Eddie.
Oh, okay.
Maggie,
It looks like
Maggie
hers.
wasn't a member of Ash until she's in my class. Yeah, she's in the same class of Ash as me.
That's nerds.
Yeah. The Ash is the adventures of Sherlock Holmes for everybody who
Yes.
doesn't know.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we only have a couple of minutes left. But I wanted to mention, and I know I believe this will be coming up in a panel tomorrow.
Yeah.
An ancestor of mine.
Tonight.
Oh, is it tonight? I'm sorry. Tonight.
Moved it to tonight.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. What's the name of the panel again?
Organizing a con is hard.
Sherlock Holmes.
Okay, yeah. So this is Bob's fan fiction that you actually talked about at the first From Baker Street to the Holodeck panel, because I've listened to that Baker Street Babes episode multiple times.
Yes.
That's why he is the famous Bob.
But you can read it on AO3.
Yes, you can read this on AO3,
Yeah,
and
you don't have to.
I
take that one.
think there are
You can
some.
either, there are handouts, with the URL, or you just go on AO3, it's, search for Spot Block. And you'll also find it.
Awesome.
That was one thing, Spot Block, it's not too thick.
The thing is that, when I hear that does immediately bring up something different.
Yeah.
to mind.
I'm sure you can find that on there too.
Yeah. That's
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
That's what I was.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you.
We have exactly 1
Yeah.
minute left. Does anybody have any questions?
Just, I just learned when Monica and I did, T. Rick Jones's, podcast.
Yes. What is that called
T. Rick Jones.
again? Fair. I'm sure you can find that on YouTube very easily.
Anyone aware that Brent Spiner was a Sherlock Holmes fan before?
I forgot to bring that up. Yes.
Didn't realize that.
Yeah.
That was really
Yeah.
cool.
Speaking of Brent, has everybody read fan fiction, his book?
I just finished listening to
No, I
the
haven't.
Audible
It's
version.
fucking great. And I
It's
highly
hilarious.
recommend it.
All right, I got an Audible.
You know what was really funny to me was the way that like a lot of female characters were like falling all over him, and I was like, see, normally I would call bullshit on this with the main character having women fawning all over him, but this is Brent Spiner we're talking about, who was actually a sex symbol at the time. I'm like, actually, this is realistic.
No, I mean, it was great. I enjoyed it. I was actually at the BSI weekend like 2 years ago or something, and wandered down to the Strand bookshop. And they had it, and they were like signed copies. I was like,
Oh,
"Fine, I'm gonna
nice.
yes, I'm gonna have one of those.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
No, it's
Like few doors down from him.
Probably.
I think that's yeah, it's a very fun novel. Definitely recommend. And if you have Audible, then like every TNG cast member who has dialogue in the book actually recorded their dialogue. So it's especially funny with Patrick Stewart because this is kind of a parody. So Patrick Stewart is being a silly version of himself, and it's delightful.
Yeah, it's like a little bit real, a little bit not real, pretty meta, very witty.
Yes, it's a lot of fun. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. And I think that is a good way to end this. So thank y'all for coming. And thank you guys for beautiful.
Peace and long life.
Peace and long life.
Dynamics of a Podcast was created by Madeline Quinones, with sound design and editing by Dixie Parkinson, and music by Joshua Harvey. We do this podcast purely for the fun of the thing. Thank you for listening, and please join us next time.